Let's dive right into a seriously fascinating mystery from about 12,800 years ago. Welcome to this explainer, where we're basically acting as detectives, doing a full review of one of Earth's most hotly debated cold cases. Picture this. Our planet was steadily warming up at the end of the last ice age, and then, completely out of nowhere, it violently plunged back into near glacial conditions. So what actually caused this massive whiplash? Was it just a routine geological shift, or a catastrophic event falling from the sky? Well, let's dig into the physical evidence and find out. This boundary has actually been described by experts as a line ruled across time itself. And honestly, that perfectly captures what we're looking at in the dirt. If you dig down into the soil, you'll find evidence of this vibrant, thriving ecosystem. We're talking mammoths, mastodons, native horses, the works. But then you hit this one specific layer. And right above it, that bustling world just completely vanishes. It's eerie. Nature literally drew a strict, dark line separating an era of absolute abundance from a sudden freezing extinction.
So we're looking at a totally bizarre sequence of events here. Around 15,000 years ago, temperatures were warming nicely and forests were expanding. But right at the 12,800 year mark, bam! Ice cores from Greenland show temperatures plummeted by more than 15 degrees Celsius. That's a massive, sudden freeze known as the Younger Dryas. And precisely in this tiny, tiny window of geological time, North America loses a huge share of its megafauna, and the sophisticated Clovis human culture just seems to vanish. 3 massive events, all crashing together in one geological instant. Now, the physical anchor for this whole mystery is something geologists call the black mat. When you look at an actual cross-section of the Earth, from places like Murray Springs, Arizona, you see this thin, dark band of organic, rich sediment. That is the exact boundary layer. Down below it, you've got mammoth bones and Clovis hunting points. But within it and above it, absolutely nothing. This layer has been found at 27 different sites across North America, and it just sits there like geological crime scene tape, marking the exact moment the entire world changed. So, what could possibly trigger 3 massive global shifts at the exact same time? Scientists desperately needed a culprit for this prehistoric crime scene. How do you explain a 15-degree temperature drop, mass animal death, and a dramatic human cultural shift all at once? For decades, there was no real consensus. But then, in 2007, a bold and highly controversial hypothesis dropped. A nuclear physicist named Richard Firestone and his team proposed the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, suggesting that an extraterrestrial trigger actually set all this destruction into motion. Proponents of this theory suggest a fragmented comet basically exploded over North America. But here's the catch. This wasn't your typical asteroid strike. It was what's called an airburst. Imagine a swarm of cometary debris entering Earth's atmosphere, but instead of slamming into the ground and leaving a massive hole, these fragile fragments detonate high up in the sky. This would send a downdraft of intensely hot gases and massive shockwaves across the continent, instantly igniting up to 10% of the Earth's biomass in huge wildfires, and ultimately causing a suffocating impact winter. Now, the prosecution's case here heavily relies on microscopic fingerprints found right inside that black mat we talked about. Researchers drilled in and found a truly bizarre cocktail of materials. We're talking massive spikes in platinum, which is super rare on Earth but very common in space. They found magnetic, iron-rich microspherules, basically tiny droplets of melted rock. There were microscopic nanodiamonds that only form under immense pressure. And, most recently, they found shocked quartz. These are sand grains physically deformed by extreme heat and pressure that perfectly match the physics of an atmospheric airburst. And this impact signature wasn't just some local North American anomaly. We are talking about an event of unimaginable scale. Proponents have actually documented these exact geochemical fingerprints at over 50 sites spread across at least 4 continents, from the Greenland ice sheet over to Europe, all the way down to southern Chile, South Africa, and Syria. The synchronous nature of all these findings really suggests that 12,800 years ago, a massive portion of the globe was just completely blanketed in cosmic debris and ash. But this raises one glaring, obvious question. If an event was big enough to plunge the northern hemisphere back into an ice age, where on Earth is the crater? Well, the impact team argues the comet actually hit the 2-kilometer-thick Laurentide ice sheet, which completely absorbed the blow. Think of the 1908 Tunguska event in Russia. An airburst doesn't always leave a crater. The theory is that any large fragments that did hit would have just shattered against that massive glacier. The ice eventually melted, washed away the evidence, and prevented any permanent scar in the underlying bedrock.
Okay, but here's where the story refuses to just be simple. Science demands rigorous proof, right? And almost immediately after that 2007 publication, there was a massive, highly credentialed backlash from the broader scientific community, basically labeling this a fringe theory. Why? Well, because independent teams, led by researchers like Todd Sussrevel and Vance Holliday, went out to visit these exact same boundary sites and came back empty-handed. They just couldn't replicate the data. They couldn't find the spikes in magnetic minerals or rare nanodiamonds. They questioned the dating methods and even pointed out instances of image manipulation in the original studies.
So independent researchers basically found alternative, perfectly earthly explanations for pretty much every single piece of extraterrestrial evidence the impact team put forward. Let's break it down. Where the impact team saw magnetic comet spherules, skeptics saw ordinary dirt, or, in a very uncosmic twist, the organic residue of bug excrement. The nanodiamonds? They said those were likely just misidentified materials. The widespread wildfires? Skeptics point out that charcoal spikes are totally normal in natural bog fires. And as for the megafauna extinctions, well, those can easily be explained by human overhunting and the natural whiplash of the climate. No comet required. And hey, what about the vanished Clovis people? Anthropologists are quick to point out that they likely didn't just disappear in some cosmic flash of light. The whole impact hypothesis relies heavily on the idea that this culture collapsed instantly, but the genetic and archaeological records actually show incredible human resilience. As the climate shifted and their giant prey disappeared, the Clovis people didn't evaporate. They just adapted. Those large stone points used for hunting mammoths were simply replaced by smaller tools called fulsome points, which were better for hunting bison. The culture evolved, it wasn't wiped from the sky. So, after a full review of the evidence, we're left weighing two truly colossal forces against each other: a sudden cosmic intervention versus the devastating whiplash of Earth's own natural rhythms. On one side, you have this elegant, terrifying theory of a comet airburst forcing an impact winter. On the other, you have traditional theories that don't need a comet at all, like a massive pulse of glacial meltwater naturally disrupting ocean currents and shutting down the planet's heat, or maybe an undiscovered, massive volcanic eruption. It's honestly a perfect example of just how complex decoding our planet's history truly is. This whole thing remains a thrilling, totally unresolved scientific debate. Both sides are looking at the exact same dark layer of Earth and seeing a completely different story. So I want to leave you with this provocative thought. How would you investigate this prehistoric cold case? If you were handed a single sediment core from that black mat and given just one instrument, what would you test first? Would you look for cosmic platinum or the earthly rhythms of ancient oceans? Thank you so much for joining this explainer. Keep questioning the ground beneath your feet and never